My name is Alex, I'm 32 years old, and I build things with my hands. For a living, I run a custom furniture business, crafting pieces that are meant to last for generations. It's a quiet, steady, and honest line of work. Or at least, it was quiet until the day my world exploded. It happened with a phone call, the kind that makes the blood in your veins turn to ice. It was my wife, Sarah, her voice a choked, frantic whisper that I could barely decipher through her sobs. Alex, you need to get here. Now. It's Leo. Our son. Our tiny, perfect, fragile son, born 3 months premature and fighting for his life in the neonatal intensive care unit. I was on a job site, sawdust in my hair, and the sound of a circular saw buzzing in the background. I hit the kill switch, plunging the workshop into a sudden, terrifying silence. What is it? Sarah, what happened? I demanded, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Her next words didn't make sense. They were a jumble of sounds that my brain refused to assemble into a coherent thought. It's your parents, she cried. They were here with Ben. Alex, they unplugged Leo's monitoring equipment. They unplugged his ventilator to charge Ben's laptop for a moment. I couldn't breathe. The world tilted on its axis. Unplugged. His ventilator. To charge a laptop. They had chosen my brother's convenience over my son's life. In that single, sickening moment, 2 decades of being overlooked, of being the second choice son, of being the reliable, invisible backup plan, all coalesced into a cold, hard diamond of rage in my chest. What they didn't know, what they couldn't possibly comprehend, was that while they were busy propping up my golden boy brother's latest failing dream, I had been quietly, diligently building an empire. And that empire, built on the foundations of their neglect, was about to bring their entire world crashing down. Before I tell you how I made them regret the day they valued a PowerPoint presentation over their own grandson's breath, do me a favor. Hit that like button and subscribe if you've ever felt invisible in your own family. Let me know in the comments if you've ever had to be your own hero, because this story is for you. To understand why my parents would do something so monstrous, you have to understand the ecosystem of my family. It was a carefully balanced terrarium of dysfunction, with my brother, Ben, as the prize orchid, and me as the dirt he grew in. Ben was the golden child. He was born with a certain charm, a slick, easy smile that could talk anyone into anything. He was the sun around which my parents, Richard and Carol, orbited. His mediocre grades were framed as artistic genius, his laziness as a laid-back temperament. He was destined for greatness, they'd say, beaming with pride as he presented his latest half-baked idea. I, on the other hand, was the scapegoat, the afterthought. I was quiet, serious, and good with my hands. While Ben was failing his liberal arts classes for the 3rd time, I was taking apart and rebuilding lawnmower engines in the garage. My father, a man who valued appearances above all else, would look at my grease-stained hands with disdain. It's a dirty hobby, Alex, he'd sniff. When are you going to apply yourself to something real, like your brother? I remember one Christmas when we were kids. Ben wanted the new, top-of-the-line 10-speed racing bike. I wanted a professional set of wood-carving tools. Christmas morning, a gleaming red bike was waiting for Ben, a monument to our parents' affection. My gift was a cheap, plastic-handled starter kit from a discount store. We thought you could see if you actually like it before we invest in anything serious, my mother explained, her eyes already drifting back to watch Ben pop a wheelie in the driveway. The message was clear, Ben's passions were investments, mine were fleeting whims. This pattern defined our lives. Ben crashed the family car at 17, they bought him a brand new convertible. I worked 2 part-time jobs all through high school to save up for a beat-up pickup truck for my tools. My father lectured me about the insurance costs. They poured tens of thousands of dollars into Ben's ever-changing university majors and then into his series of startups, a gourmet dog food delivery service, a line of artisanal shoelaces, an app that told you what to wear. All of them failed, and each time, my parents were there to bail him out, sighing about the cost but secretly thrilled by his ambition. They never gave me a dime. I didn't ask, and they didn't offer. While they were co-signing loans for Ben, I was putting myself through trade school at night, working construction during the day. My only encouragement came from our old neighbor, Mr. Henderson, a retired general contractor. He'd seen me fixing things in our yard and one day offered me $50 to repair his fence. He watched me work with a critical eye, then nodded slowly. "You've got the touch, kid," he said, his voice raspy from years of sawdust and cheap cigars. "You see the world in straight lines and right angles. Don't ever let anyone tell you that's not a gift." He became the father I never had, teaching me how to read blueprints, how to bid a job, and most importantly, how to value my own labor. "Your time and your skill," he'd say, tapping his temple, "that's your bank account. Don't ever let anyone make a withdrawal without your permission." It was a lesson my parents would one day learn the hard way. After trade school, I turned my parents' garage, the one they'd always complained was cluttered with my projects, into my first workshop. I started small, building bookshelves and coffee tables for friends. I was meticulous. I used hardwoods, traditional joinery, and hand-rubbed oil finishes. I poured all the frustration and loneliness of my youth into every dovetail joint and every mortise and tenon. My work was strong, beautiful, and built to last. It was everything I felt I wasn't. Word of mouth began to spread. A friend's boss saw a table I'd made and commissioned a dining set. Her interior designer saw the set and hired me to build a custom library for one of her high-end clients. The work was slow but steady, and I was fiercely disciplined. I lived like a monk, working 16-hour days, 7 days a week. I funneled every single penny I made back into the business, upgrading my tools, buying better lumber. My parents remained blissfully ignorant. They'd occasionally see me heading to the garage and shake their heads. "Still playing with wood, Alex?" my mother would ask with a pitying smile. "Ben is meeting with venture capitalists this week." They never asked what I was building. They never asked to see my work. They never asked if I was making any money. In their minds, I was still the boy with the dirty hobby, a permanent fixture in the background of Ben's glorious, high-stakes life. Then I met Sarah. I was installing cabinets in a new wing of the local hospital, and she was a nurse on the pediatric floor. She was smart, funny, and had a no-nonsense kindness that cut through all my defenses. She saw the calluses on my hands not as a sign of a lowly trade, but as evidence of hard work and dedication. When I finally worked up the nerve to show her my workshop and the portfolio of my work, her eyes lit up. "Alex, this is incredible," she breathed, running a hand over a finished slab of black walnut. "You're not just a carpenter. You're an artist." She was the first person, aside from Mr. Henderson, who ever saw me. Really saw me. With her encouragement, I took the biggest leap of my life. I drained my savings, leased a 5,000 square foot industrial space, registered my business as an LLC, and hired my first 2 employees. I named it Henderson Woodcraft, in honor of the man who had believed in me. Away from the suffocating atmosphere of my family, the business exploded. We were getting contracts from architects, luxury hotels, and even a few local celebrities. I was earning more in a month than my father made in a year. And I never told them. It wasn't a malicious secret, not at first. It was a matter of survival. My success was my own. It was a clean, quiet space that they hadn't touched, hadn't criticized, hadn't tainted with their condescending pity. It was the one part of my life that was just for me. They never asked, so I never told them. The drive to the hospital was a blur of red lights and blaring horns. I left my truck idling at the curb and sprinted through the automatic doors of the hospital, my work boots echoing like gunshots in the sterile quiet of the hallway. I found Sarah in the family waiting room just outside the NICU. She was pacing, her face pale and streaked with tears, clutching our tiny son, Leo, protectively to her chest. He was swaddled in blankets, so small he seemed to disappear in her arms. The head neonatal nurse was with her, a woman named Linda with kind eyes and an iron will. She gave me a grim, sympathetic look. And then I saw them. My parents and Ben, huddled in the corner like defendants in a courtroom. My father, Richard, had his arms crossed, his face a mask of stubborn indignation. My mother, Carol, was wringing her hands, her expression one of flustered panic. And Ben? My brother was slumped in a chair, staring at his high-end laptop, which was now, I noted with a surge of black fury, plugged into the wall. What happened? I asked, my voice dangerously low. Sarah finally looked at me, her eyes blazing. I went to get a coffee, she said, her voice shaking with rage. I was gone for 5 minutes. I came back, and the alarms were going off. The monitor was black. The ventilator was silent. And your mother was holding the plug, trying to fit Ben's charger into the socket. My mother flinched. We didn't know, she insisted, her voice rising. The baby was just sleeping so peacefully. We didn't think it was doing anything important. It's a ventilator, Mom. I roared, and for the first time in my life, I saw fear in her eyes. It was breathing for him. You unplugged his lungs. Ben finally looked up from his screen, an expression of profound annoyance on his face. Look, it was an emergency, okay? I had a video conference with investors in Tokyo. My battery was at 1%. It was $1 million deal on the line. I had to plug it in somewhere. His utter lack of remorse, his complete inability to see past his own selfish needs, was breathtaking. My father stepped forward, puffing out his chest. Don't you use that tone with your mother, Alex. It was a simple mistake. No harm was done, the nurse fixed it. But Ben's career could have been ruined. You have to understand priorities. They were telling me about priorities while my son, whose lungs weren't strong enough to work on their own, was recovering from having his life support casually disconnected. That cold diamond of rage in my chest began to burn. I took a deep breath, walked over to them, and looked them dead in the eye. Get out, I said. My father scoffed. Excuse me? We are his grandparents. We have a right to be here, no, I said, my voice as hard and unyielding as steel. You have a right to be a grandparent when you act like one. What you did was negligent and dangerous. You put my son's life at risk for a laptop. You are no longer welcome here. Get out. Now Ben stood up. You can't do this, Alex. This is a family matter. This isn't a family matter, I countered, stepping closer until he instinctively shrank back. This is a medical matter. And you are a contamination. Leave, or I will have hospital security remove you. Their faces were a picture of shocked disbelief. They had never heard this tone from me. This wasn't quiet, reliable, invisible Alex. This was someone else. After a tense standoff, my father, muttering about disrespect, finally herded them towards the elevator. As the doors slid shut on their indignant faces, I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. I had finally, after 32 years, drawn a line in the sand. I just had no idea what kind of war was about to cross it. A few days passed in a blur of hospital visits and sleepless nights. Leah was stable, thank God, but the incident had shaken us to the core. We banned my family from the hospital, a decision that was met with a barrage of angry texts and voicemails accusing us of being cruel and unforgiving. Then came the summons. My mother called, her voice dripping with manufactured tears, insisting on a family meeting at their house to talk things through and heal this rift. Sarah warned me it was a trap, but I knew I had to go. I had to see this through to the end. I walked into my parents' home, the house I grew up in, and it felt like foreign territory. Sarah was at my side, her hand a warm, steady presence in mine. They were all there, arranged in the living room like a tribunal, my father in his armchair, my mother on the sofa, and Ben pacing in front of the fireplace. They didn't offer us a seat. The ambush began immediately. I have never, in my life, been so humiliated, my father began, his voice trembling with fury. To be escorted out of a hospital like a common criminal. After everything we have done for you, this is the thanks we get? You and your wife's dramatic overreaction has caused this family immeasurable pain. My mother chimed in, dabbing at her dry eyes with a tissue. We said we were sorry, Alex. It was an accident. Family is supposed to forgive. Instead, you're punishing us, keeping us from our only grandchild. I was about to respond when Ben held up a hand, stopping me. This is actually bigger than that, he said, adopting the tone of a CEO addressing his underlings. As you know, my app, Connect You, is in its final development stage. We are on the verge of a major breakthrough. But we've hit a temporary cash flow problem. I just stared at him, waiting for the punchline. We need an influx of capital to get us to the next round of funding, he continued. The fact is, we need $250,000. Immediately, I almost laughed. It was so absurd, so perfectly, predictably Ben. My father leaned forward, his eyes narrowed. Your mother and I have already remortgaged this house to fund his dream. We have nothing left to give. But you have that little workshop of yours. That little side business. He said the words side business with so much condescension it was almost comical. It's time for you to step up, Alex. For once. It is your duty as a son and a brother to help your family. You will liquidate whatever assets you have in that little company of yours and you will give Ben the money he needs. It's the least you can do. The room was silent. They all looked at me, their faces a mixture of desperation and entitlement. They truly believed this was a reasonable request. They believed I owed them. This was the moment. The culmination of a lifetime of being underestimated. I felt a profound, almost serene calm wash over me. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and tapped the screen a few times before placing it on the coffee table in front of them. On the screen was the homepage for Henderson Woodcraft. It featured a sleek, professional video showcasing our workshop, our team, and our portfolio of breathtakingly beautiful, high-end furniture in sprawling mansions and luxury penthouses. I swiped to our clients page, a scrolling list of some of the city's most prominent architects, designers, and business leaders. Then, I opened a password-protected file and swiped to the final page, the company's audited financial statement from the previous fiscal year. The net revenue was clearly displayed at the top. It was a 7-figure number. I looked up and watched their faces. It was a slow-motion symphony of disbelief. My father's jaw literally dropped. My mother's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. Ben just stared at the screen, his face turning a pale, sickly green. The gears were turning. I could see the greedy calculations firing behind their eyes as shock morphed into avarice. My father was the first to recover, his voice a hoarse, sputtering wreck. Well, oh well, then, he stammered, pointing a shaky finger at the phone. If this is true, then $250,000 is nothing to you. It's a rounding error. You have to help your brother. It's even more your duty now. He looked at me, his eyes gleaming with a desperate, rapacious light. He didn't see a son who had succeeded against all odds. He saw a walking, talking ATM. The man who had spent my entire life dismissing my passion as a dirty hobby was now demanding its profits. The sheer hypocrisy of it all was staggering. I picked up my phone, slid it back into my pocket, and met his gaze. My voice was quiet, but it filled the sudden, heavy silence in the room. No, I said. The word hung in the air, simple and absolute. No, I don't. Ben took a step forward, his face contorted in a mask of outrage. What do you mean, no? We're your family. After everything we did for you. What, exactly, did you do for me? I asked, my voice still level. Let's review, shall we? You invested in Ben. You paid for his 4 years of college, which he never finished. You paid for his apartment. You paid for his cars. You co-signed the loans for every single one of his failed businesses. You poured hundreds of thousands of dollars into what you saw as a high-yield stock. I gestured from my father to my mother. You made an investment. But it was a bad one. You invested in a liability. Then I pointed a finger at my own chest. I was the other stock option. The low-risk, steady-growth utility stock. But you never invested a single cent in me. You never paid for my school. You never gave me a loan. You never even gave me a word of encouragement. I built this business with my own 2 hands, with my own sweat, and with the help of people who actually believed in me. I looked at my father. The only thing you ever gave me, Dad, was the garage you couldn't wait for me to clear out. So, no. I will not be bailing out your bad investment. The Henderson Woodcraft bank account is closed to you. Permanently. I turned to Sarah, who was watching with a look of fierce pride, and took her hand. The only investment I'm interested in making from now on is in my own family. In my wife, and in my son. The son whose life you were willing to risk for a laptop charger. I walked towards the door, Sarah's hand held tight in mine. My mother started to sob, real tears this time. Alex, please. You're tearing this family apart. I paused at the door and looked back at them, 3 shattered figures in a living room that suddenly looked small and shabby. No, Mom, I said, my voice devoid of anger, filled only with a deep, weary finality. You're wrong. The family was already broken. I'm just sweeping up the pieces, and with that, we walked out, leaving them in the ruins of their own making, gaping in stunned, utter disbelief. The door clicked shut behind us, and for the first time in my life, I felt truly, completely free. The moment we were in the car, my phone started buzzing. And it didn't stop. The fallout was immediate and exactly as toxic as Sarah had predicted. It began as a coordinated assault, a campaign of emotional warfare designed to break my resolve. My mother would call, her voice thick with tears, weaving tales of a broken-hearted family, of how my selfishness was destroying her. How can you be so cruel, Alex? She'd weep. We made one little mistake, and you're holding it over our heads forever. You're punishing your own mother. When I stopped answering her calls, the texts began, each one a masterclass in guilt and manipulation. My father's approach was different. His texts were blunt, angry, and laced with insults. I was ungrateful, a disgrace, a son who had forgotten his duty. You flaunt your success while your brother suffers, one message read. You have no honor. Mr. Henderson would be ashamed of you. That one almost got to me, but then I remembered Mr. Henderson's words about not letting anyone make a withdrawal from my bank of self-worth without permission. I blocked their numbers. Both of them. Then came the flying monkeys. Relatives I hadn't spoken to in years started calling, one after another. An uncle from out of state lectured me on family loyalty. A cousin told me I was being petty and that money shouldn't come between families. They were all getting the same heavily edited, sob-story version of events from my parents, where they were the victims of their cold, unforgiving, suddenly wealthy son. My best friend, Mark, who had witnessed my family's dynamics firsthand since we were kids, became my firewall. He screened my calls and told more than one relative exactly where they could file their unsolicited opinions. My true support system, my chosen family, closed ranks around me. My employees at the workshop, who knew how hard I'd worked, were fiercely loyal. And Sarah was my rock, constantly reminding me that setting a boundary isn't an act of aggression, it's an act of self-preservation. In the midst of the chaos, my Aunt Susan, my mother's sister, called. She was the one sane person in the extended family, the only one who had ever quietly acknowledged the blatant favoritism. Don't you dare listen to them, Alex, she said, her voice firm. I just got off the phone with your mother. They are in a full-blown panic. Ben is blaming them for his business failing, and the bank sent a preliminary foreclosure notice on the house. They are not sad, they're desperate. They don't want you, they want your money. Her words were a cold, clarifying splash of water. This wasn't about family, it was a hostile takeover attempt. And I had refused the merger. A week later, we brought Leo home from the hospital. There was no grand family welcome. Instead, Sarah and I, along with Mark and a few close friends, had a small, quiet celebration in our home. Holding my son, healthy and safe, in the house I had built with my own 2 hands, surrounded by people who loved us unconditionally, I knew I had made the right choice. I was protecting him not just from medical emergencies, but from a lifetime of the emotional poison I had endured. In the months that followed, I made a conscious decision to pour all my energy into creation, not destruction. I focused on the life Sarah and I were building, a life founded on mutual respect, partnership, and genuine affection. With my family's noise silenced, my world became peaceful. The business thrived in the quiet. We landed a major contract to outfit a new boutique hotel downtown, a project that would secure our finances for years to come. I hired more people, expanded our workshop, and even started a small apprenticeship program for kids from the local trade school, hoping to be for them what Mr. Henderson had been for me. Life was good. We bought a beautiful piece of land out in the country and started designing our dream home, a place with a huge workshop for me and a massive garden for Sarah and Leo. I started therapy, finally unpacking the complex baggage of my childhood. My therapist helped me understand that my craving for my parents' approval was a cage I had built for myself. The moment I had walked out of their house, I had found the key. Meanwhile, the consequences of my family's choices began to cascade. Aunt Susan kept me peripherally informed. Ben's $1 million app, Connect You, collapsed into a black hole of debt, just like all his other ventures. He had produced nothing but a flashy website and a mountain of invoices. With no bailout from me, the creditors came for my parents. The foreclosure notice became a reality. They were forced to sell the house I grew up in, the monument to their middle-class pride, for a loss, just to cover Ben's debts. The proceeds were wiped out. My father's pension took a massive hit. They ended up moving into a small, bleak, two-bedroom apartment in a run-down part of town. The fall was as public as it was brutal. For my father, a man obsessed with appearances and status, it was the ultimate humiliation. According to Aunt Susan, he barely left the apartment. Ben, unable to face the failure or take any responsibility, blamed them for not trying hard enough to persuade me. He packed a bag one day and moved across the country, leaving them to live in the wreckage he had created. There was a part of me, a small, wounded child part, that felt a flicker of vindictive satisfaction. But mostly, I just felt a profound sadness. It was such a waste. They had gambled everything on the wrong son and lost it all. My healing wasn't about watching them fail, it was about realizing that my success was never dependent on their validation in the first place. My joy was in watching Leo take his first steps on grass I had planted, in the smell of fresh-cut cedar from my workshop, and in the easy, loving smile on Sarah's face. I was building a legacy, and it had nothing to do with them. About a year after the confrontation, a letter arrived. It was a simple, thin envelope with my mother's familiar, looping handwriting on the front. I stared at it for a long time, half tempted to throw it in the fireplace. Sarah saw it on the counter. "Whatever it says," she said gently, "we'll deal with it together that night." I opened it. The letter was rambling and full of justifications, a long, winding road of excuses about the stress they were under and how Ben had always needed more help. It was classic my mother, refusing to take full ownership. But buried in the third paragraph were the words I never thought I would read. "We were wrong, Alex. We were so proud of Ben's big talk that we couldn't see the real success that was right in front of us. We were blind. We took you for granted, and I am so sorry for the pain we caused, and for what we did at the hospital." That was unforgivable. She went on to say that she didn't expect anything, didn't expect money or for things to go back to the way they were. She just asked if, one day, she could please see her grandson. Not as a right, but as a privilege. It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was real. The kernel of genuine remorse was there. I discussed it with Sarah for days. My instinct was to protect my peace, to keep the door firmly shut. But Sarah, with her endless compassion, offered another perspective. "Forgiveness isn't for them, Alex," she said. "It's for you. It's about letting go of the anger so it doesn't poison you. It doesn't mean you forget. It doesn't mean you trust them. It just means you're letting go." We decided to allow a meeting. On our terms. We chose a neutral location, a public park on a sunny Saturday afternoon. We arrived first, spreading a blanket on the grass. When I saw them walking towards us, my breath caught in my throat. They looked diminished. My father had lost weight, his shoulders slumped inside a coat that seemed too big for him. My mother's face was etched with lines of worry that hadn't been there before. They looked old. The meeting was painfully awkward. My mother started to cry the moment she saw Leo toddling across the grass. I watched her carefully as she knelt down, her hands trembling. She didn't rush, she didn't grab. She just looked at him, her face a canvas of regret and awe. When she finally held him, it was with a reverence I had never seen from her. My father stood back, his hands shoved in his pockets. He watched me for a long time, then cleared his throat. "You've done well for yourself, son," he said, his voice gruff and thick with emotion. He couldn't quite meet my eye. "That house you're building. Susan sent pictures. It's good work." He finally looked at me. I was wrong. About everything, it was the closest he would ever get to an apology, and somehow, it was enough. We didn't stay long. But as we left, I knew that a door that had been slammed shut and bolted was now open, just a crack. It wasn't a return to the past. It was the potential start of something new, something fragile, built on a foundation of hard-won truth and brutally clear boundaries. Looking back on it all now, from the peace of my own home, with the sound of my son's laughter drifting in from the yard, the entire journey seems both surreal and inevitable. For so many years, I ran on a treadmill, chasing a prize I could never win, my parents' approval. I thought that if I was just quiet enough, responsible enough, and successful enough, they would finally turn around and see me. The great, painful irony is that they only saw me when I finally stopped caring if they looked. The moment I stood up for myself, for my wife, and for my son, was the moment I truly came into my own. The confrontation wasn't just about money or a business, it was a declaration of self-worth. It was me, finally telling the world and myself that I was not an afterthought. My family's downfall was a tragedy of their own making, a lesson in misplaced values. They worshipped at the altar of charisma and flash, and they were blind to the quiet, steady value of hard work and integrity. They didn't unplug my son's ventilator because they were evil, they did it because, in their world, I was so invisible and my life so unimportant that the consequences of their action simply didn't register. They couldn't conceive of a world where my needs, or my son's, outweighed Ben's. The ultimate lesson I learned is that you cannot choose the family you are born into, but you can, and you must, choose what you tolerate. You define your own worth. You set your own boundaries. True family isn't about blood, it's about respect. It's about the people who show up, who see you, who celebrate your victories, and who hold you up when you falter. It's my wife Sarah, my friend Mark, and the team at my workshop. That is my family. My relationship with my parents is tenuous. We see them a few times a year, in short, supervised bursts. The power dynamic has irrevocably shifted. There is respect now, born of fear and regret on their part, and of firm boundaries on mine. Ben is still out of the picture, a ghost in our family history. Sometimes I feel a pang of sadness for what we lost, for the family we could have been. But then I look at the family I have created, and I am filled with a profound and unshakable sense of peace. My journey was painful, but it led me here, to a life more rich and authentic than I could have ever imagined. If my story resonated with you, if you've ever had to fight to be seen or had to build your own damn life from scratch, share your experience in the comments below. Let's create a community of people who refuse to be invisible. Thank you for listening.